Saquon the sensational. Should he go for Eric Dickerson's record or think about the big picture? We'll talk about that today here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is right. It's your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, whether you listen to them or you watch them. Make sure you go to that location each and every day so you do not miss an episode. Here on Locked On NFL, what we do is use the local experts twice a day to explain and go over the biggest stories from around the National Football League, and that's what we'll do today with my man Julian Council, our Monday guest host here on Locked On NFL, along with me, Tony Wiggins, the barber. Here's what we're going to talk about. You ready? All right. Monday Night Football preview at the end. Before that, to tank or not to tank. Some teams think they got it right by actually losing yesterday. That's weird, but I get it. We'll talk about that. Commanders do a complete 180. I wonder if Daniel Snyder somewhere realizing how much he messed the bag up. I mean, really messed this up. And all he had to do was get out of the way. At the top of the show, Saquon going for the rushing record. A reminder, we are also available over on Locked On NFL is available over on Amazon Music. Make sure you check us out over on Amazon Music. Julian Council, we are going to go through some things today, talking about the good, the bad, and what could be the ugly tonight on Monday Night Football. But first and foremost, Saquon has 2,000 yards. He's not even considered top 3 for MVP in a lot of people's minds, but that's because other guys have done so good. But in terms of establishing value, true value, Philadelphia is a totally different team with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at a couple of years ago when they had Miles Sanders when they went to the Super Bowl, he had a fantastic season, was a Pro Bowler that year, but he was not nearly as good as Saquon Barkley has been this season and has been in the past when healthy in New York. And that's really been his only issue is staying healthy. And that's part of the reason why the running back position has been devalued when you see guys like David Johnson get paid, then get hurt, and guys like Todd Gurley get hurt as well after getting paid. Saquon Barkley has at least bucked that trend for a year. And my hope is he can continue to stay healthy. We can continue to see one of the best players in the National Football League and someone who, absolutely should be in the MVP conversation. But as we talk about for the last couple Mondays, they already gone and gave that to Josh Allen.
Yeah, they gave that to Josh, man. And by the way, with that, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that without Saquon Barkley, Philadelphia wasn't expected to or have not been the best team in the NFC East they has. It's like people that are talking about Lamar Jackson saying, yeah, things get real easy. You see who he has behind him? Oh, yeah, but I also know what else is behind him. Years where he didn't have Derrick Henry and he still won the MVP. So we're not going to just put it totally on.
Which was last year, by the way.
You know what I'm saying? It's almost like they looking at Derrick Henry and say, that's the only reason he won. Oh, really? Derrick Henry was in Tennessee last year. They ain't the only reason he won anything. But we just give it credit where credit is due. The Philadelphia Eagles are once again the NFC East champs. Gino and the crew at Locked On Eagles, they're real happy about it. I'm going to let them tell you about it in just a second. We'll come back and we'll discuss how far we think the Eagles can go.
It wasn't 40-46, but 41-7 sure is sweet. I'm Gino Camilleri, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, here to tell you that the Philadelphia Eagles are the champions of the NFC East in the year 2024 after knocking off the Cowboys at home 41-7. Kenny Pickett in this game looked really good early on after a difficult 2-drive stretch to start the game. They would go and score multiple consecutive touchdowns. And then even when Kenny Pickett came out of the game, Tanner McKee would go in and throw multiple touchdown passes of his own. Saquon Barkley would run for 2,000 yards. The defense would force 4 turnovers, including a pick 6. You got to feel good if you're the Eagles. After that loss to Washington last week, the playoffs are now in sight, and Jalen Hurts and the rest of this team can get healthy. I'm Gino Camilleri. Tune into the Locked On Eagles podcast for all that and more.
So I'm guessing that there was a way Philly could get the number 1 seed. Like if Green Bay had beaten Minnesota yesterday, and then Minnesota turned around in week 18 and had beaten Detroit, or Detroit loses tonight to San Francisco, which is
right. Don't matter either way.
There was a path to Philadelphia to get the home field, but now that's not going to happen. With basically that game, the home field and the bye is going to be decided next week between Green Bay and Minnesota if it's not, solved tonight. The thing is with all of that is, what do you do if you're Saquon? Now, Saquon had a chance earlier this year to break a record, and he said, no, let the young guys play. Remember that? He told him no. Yeah. Him and Sirianni had a heart-to-heart. I wonder if they're going to have a heart-to-heart now about it, because what Saquon has said was he came here with a goal. It did not sound like that goal was to get the rushing record. It sounded like that goal was to get something that's more team-oriented.
Yeah, I mean, there's something far more important than him breaking the NFL rushing record, which should have an asterisk because it's a 17-game season. He's played 16. I don't know how many games Eric Dickerson played when he set the record.
16.
But it was 16.
And Juice did it in 14.
Okay, so it would be the record, of course, but we all understand he got the extra game. So I think for Philly, it needs to be a team decision. It should not be on Saquon whether he wants to go out there and play or not. The team's got to think about what's best for them moving forward. Knowing that Jalen Hurts, he has a concussion situation. I'm expecting he'll be fine and ready to go for the playoffs. And obviously Kenny Pickett, he went out in that game also with the rib injury. That was something he entered the game with. They got to focus on being healthy. And they're not the only team out here that has some decisions to make. Like, I would imagine Buffalo probably does not play this weekend. Baltimore has to play Pittsburgh. Depending on what happens in that first game, Baltimore and Cincinnati can just say, now we're good on Saturday night. That might not matter at all. So that's an interesting scheduling quirk. Like the Chargers, they have nothing to play for because they've already locked up, I think, the 6 seed. Potentially could be the 5 seed, depending on how things play out with Pittsburgh. But still, they're in the playoffs, depending on what matchup they want. But they're in either way. The Rams, they don't need to play anybody. The Lions don't even need to play tonight. We'll get to that later on. And in Washington, Green Bay, they can play for seeding, but they're both in. So we're sitting here week 17 with a lot of teams that can decide, do we care whether we're the 6 or the 7 seed, or are we just trying to get healthy and go for the ultimate prize? And Philly is certainly one of those teams.
And let me put it to you this way. If Saquon doesn't break Eric Dickerson's record, nobody's going to remember that because Saquon Barkley, he's still playing. He's still got more time. Also, Eric Dickerson's had that record for 40 years, right?
Right.
But if Saquon plays and he breaks something else and they ain't talking about no record, everybody will remember that and talk about Nick Sirianni until the cows come home, because stuff like that can always happen, but it should not happen in a game that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and I always hate saying a game doesn't matter, but at this point in time, their seeding's locked up to the 2 seed. They are one of these Super Bowl favorites. He has had a phenomenal season. He got to 2,000. That should be enough. So let's hang it up, and then we'll see a Super Wild Card weekend in a couple weeks, Saquon.
All right, so we got a Power Pack segment 2. We're going to hit 3 teams. We're going to hit the Falcons. We can't talk about the Commanders without talking about the Falcons. We're also going to listen to Peter Bukowski because I got so frustrated watching Green Bay yesterday. But it's the same frustration I've had all season. I'm going to let you explain it to me, Julian. Do they get credit for all of their losses being against really good teams? Or at some point, do they get shellacked for the fact that they don't answer it now, but should we get on them because they keep losing all those games the same dang way? And that is irritating. We'll talk about that and more here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Rocket Money. That's right. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you were paying for twice in the past, if you've ever used them? Because I know you've used them by now. You heard me talk about them. Well, it happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I was actually paying for twice, and then it was stuff that I no longer used. Rocket Money found that for me and made it easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant in your finances, man. And who doesn't need a personal assistant sometimes? Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even goals you want to hit this year. For me, it was one of the best features ever. And my wife was really, really happy that I was able to save money because we found all of these apps and all of these subscriptions that I was no longer using, and we got rid of them. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, running it down here with Julian Council here as we do every Monday on Locked On NFL. Before we start talking about the Falcons and the Commanders, I want to talk about the frustration I have with Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers.
Okay.
They've had some really, really good games this year, but they start slow and then they come on like gangbusters and they fall short. And then they make these little mistakes all game, jumping off sides. They called a bad holding penalty on them yesterday, but guys just lining up off sides, doing things that are nullifying first downs. Jordan Love on 3rd and 3, throwing the ball 50 yards down the field. I want you to listen to what Peter Bukowski says, who's one of the most intelligent people, great communicator. But Peter says the reasons why he believes they are elite, but there are some things holding them back. And ironically, it's going to tell you why they aren't elite.
They have not looked like a Super Bowl caliber team in 5 chances to beat the rest of the Super Bowl caliber teams in the NFC. And I do believe that there are only 3 other ones. It's the Lions, it's the Vikings, and it's the Eagles. And yes, you can say you lost to the Vikings by a combined 4 points, and you lost to the Eagles by 1 score. And the second game against the Lions, you lost by 1 score in large part due to the officiating. And yes, if the Vikings don't get gifted 3 points in this game on a nonsense call, maybe things go differently at some point. But that's a lot of ifs and buts. And if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. I hope everyone did have a Merry Christmas. But the Packers right now are the team that gets to 3rd and 1 and then can't get lined up. They are the team that scores a touchdown, but their offensive tackle was too far off the line of scrimmage. They are the team that has a promising first drive and then one of their best players fumbles. And right now, they are the team that defensively can't rush the passer with 4 and has no answers for the fact that their best defensive back can't stay healthy.
Sounds like they are the team that they aren't elite. And that's the problem. They do everything that teams that don't win seem to do, and they do it at the wrong time.
Yeah, well, they're obviously a good team because they're not losing to bad teams, which is what good teams do. They take care of their business, and he's brought up they have played those games closely, but he doesn't want to hear it because there's been the little things that have held them back from being what Peter believes is an elite team. And I was talking about last segment that there are teams that don't necessarily have anything to play for, and Green Bay and Washington are one of them when you look at they're already locked into the playoffs and seeding. But maybe Green Bay does have something to play for because right now, they're the 7th seed. They would have to play Philadelphia, who they played way back in week 1. So, of course, things have certainly changed in the last 17 weeks since they played that game and lost by 5 against Philly. That would be their wild card matchup. If in whatever way they find a way to get to the 6th seed, that would require Washington losing to Dallas, which I don't know how that's going to happen after what just happened to the Cowboys on Sunday against Philly. They would get the Rams, and the Rams are not a contender in my mind. So that's the path right there for Green Bay to at least get to the divisional round. And the old adage, it's hard to beat the same team 3 times. They would see Minnesota or likely Detroit in that spot. So that's the path for Green Bay right now. But it's unfortunate because you look at a year ago, I felt like they were on their way to beating San Francisco before Jordan Love threw the Brett Favre tribute interception. Yep. And we were about to have the most toxic Brock Purdy discourse ever because of how the wet rain and then the whole, like, are our hands big enough? But instead, Jordan Love bailed us all out from that craziness.
I know it, man. And, it's just that there's a difference with how talented you are, how capable you are. How, when you play your absolute best, who's the most beatable? The thing about football and most sports, you actually this is one thing you have to do to make all of those things, all of that potential, you have to do it. You got to do it against people that are trying to do it. That's what makes this what it is. And until you do it, until you have demonstrated performance, we won't believe that you can actually pull it off. And Green Bay has had 5 opportunities. And the most alarming thing, and it might not be that alarming because it might make it easier to fix. The most alarming thing about them is this. Every time they lose the exact same way. And that's probably what has Peter like, come on, man, we ain't got over this yet. I tell you something else.
Can't get right.
No, can't get right. And you know what? They might be calling Raheem Morris can't get right because Raheem Morris left DC last night with a suitcase full of timeouts. And he acted like he didn't have any at the end of that game. I know you're about to pop. I see it on your face, Julian.
Oh, my God.
I see. Before we get to Aaron Freeman, I want you to go ahead and let loose, and then we'll bring Aaron Freeman here to try to cool it off.
I'm just so sick of these coaches. The only thing that matters is the clock, and they're always so concerned about preserving timeouts. Why? It does not matter. If there's only 7 seconds left and you have one timeout, it doesn't matter. You can get one playoff and you still get to like 20 yards in order to potentially get in field goal range. If he calls a timeout, there's 30 seconds and they probably run up to those 2 incompletions. Their 3rd and 10 with probably 22 seconds left.
Yep.
They would have had an opportunity still, but when there's only 7 seconds left, no opportunity. Week in and week out, we continuously see this, and I just do not understand why they're more concerned about let's save this timeout instead of the clock, which is the only thing that matters. If you don't have time, who cares whether you have a timeout in your pocket?
Yeah, you know what? That's why they call it time out. That means that when you use it, the time does not tick away. Listen to Aaron Freeman talk about the loss last night in Washington, and then we'll come back and have some good fun talking about those Commanders.
A valiant effort, but not quite good enough for the Falcons on Sunday Night Football. I'm Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons. The Falcons lost a heartbreaker in a 30-24 overtime loss to the Washington Commanders in Week 17 on Sunday Night Football. The Falcons never saw the ball in extra time with Jaden Daniels leading the Commanders on a 12-play, 7-minute drive, capped off by a 2-yard game-winning touchdown to tight end Zach Ertz. Falcons rookie quarterback Michael Penix started the game with an interception, but then settled in, giving the Falcons a 17-7 halftime lead. Washington took over in the second half, getting up 24-17, but Penix didn't quit, leading the Falcons on a 12-play scoring drive in the final 4 minutes, hitting his own tight end Kyle Pitts for the game-time touchdown with a minute to go. This loss may be the end of the Falcons' playoff hopes, with the Bucs now in the driver's seat in the NFC South going into Week 18. For more coverage of this heartbreaker and how the Falcons respond, follow Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So as a way for us to transition this into talking about Jaden Daniels, I'm going to talk about Michael Penix a little bit. He has really put the exclamation point on y'all didn't know what y'all were talking about these quarterbacks this year. And we ain't even seen J.J. McCarthy, but we've seen Bo Nix. We've obviously seen Jaden Daniels. And even in losing, people look at Drake May and they watch, they go, oh, no, that kid can play. See, that's why I always tell people, sometimes even when teams lose, you can notice, oh, it definitely ain't his fault with some of these quarterbacks. But last year in that draft, bro, nobody thought any of these guys were super elite, but they just felt like you got to try. Well, guess what? In a draft that didn't have a quote unquote generational guy, it looks like because they didn't have these inflated opinions of most of these guys, they built the systems around them, that's what you're supposed to do. Right. They took the guy that fit them. That's what you're supposed to do. And now this might be one of the best quarterback classes so far that we've seen in a long, long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Denver and Washington, not Washington, but Denver and Atlanta look pretty smart by making those decisions because they've had some decisions to make. I know Denver was one of those teams that apparently was looking at Sam Darnold, and we know now in Minnesota, they have a decision to make. Now, I will say this, and I've seen this. I saw an article from The Athletic last week, Mike Sando putting it out, talking to some front office people, saying it took Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, a good offensive line, and Jordan Addison for Sam Darnold to finally look good. Now, he did ball out, but maybe you move on. So we'll see what J.J. McCarthy can do. He's probably the one of these guys I was the least excited about coming to the NFL. Like Caleb, still got a long way to go. That situation was just effed up beyond repair this past year up in Chicago. I've loved Jaden Daniels since 2019 was at Arizona State with Herm Edwards. And the way things ended there made me kind of fall out of love with him. But once he got down to LSU, fell right back in love. And he's been more than I ever could have expected when I first watched him upset Oregon, Justin Herbert's Oregon back in 2019 there at ASU. And I mean, I love Drake, man. I'm a North Carolina guy. I've seen every game. I mean, I saw the kid back in high school. So I've known for a long time about Drake May. So none of what he's done has surprised me. I just hate that New England keeps putting him out there to get killed, and they have no help around him. But this rookie class has been phenomenal, and the one coming up, I think less so. Even though I like Cam Ward at Shador, it's not going to have the kind of guys that I think can be around, and that's really important because you got some young quarterbacks right now like Allen, Mahomes, Jackson. They're all still young. There's other guys behind them as well, like Herbert. That's a good player, but you needed another crop to really get that solid quarterback play because I think we're still in between the Bradys, the Mannings, the Breezes leaving and trying to fill those holes in some of those organizations. And with these guys coming in, I think we'll be able to do that across the league. And maybe, we won't see the scoring dip that we saw early on and that the quarterback play gets to kind of the level that the NFL certainly needs it to be on.
No doubt about it. Washington, and I wanted to make sure we park this here because there are a lot of people that suffered with that franchise through the years while Daniel Snyder was doing whatever he was doing.
My father's one.
Right. So I actually, even though I covered the Jaguars, I grew up a fan of that organization, and I always used to keep them in. You just keep peeking at them. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are they doing? Even though you cover another team, and I'm back home, and Jacksonville didn't have a team when I grew up, so that's why.
Sure, yeah.
I was 28 years old when they got the club here. So, and my mom, I lived in DC my whole life. The thing is for me, he has to now. It has to really, really hit him in the face, man. Dude, you blew this. You did this. As soon as you leave, that place was packed last night, bro. People have come back. There's enthusiasm. It looks like a club that actually does have a couple of Super Bowl trophies, and the tradition, it all popped back up within a year. Within 1 year. So we're talking about these quarterbacks. When somebody say, well, he needed two receivers, a line. Yeah, he did, sure. And that's what you're supposed to do, whether the quarterback is great or not. You have to do your job. And that's not just on the field, it's off the field. And I think Washington has done it correctly off the field and has put that kid in a situation where all he has to do now is just go out and be insulated and play football and ingratiate himself with his teammates.
He's always had tremendous talent. And the fact that he's been to go in there and have the leadership that he's had. And like Terry McLaurin's always been a good player. We just haven't necessarily been able to see his skill set highlighted. I thought Sam Howell did a fine job of Eric Bieniemy last year, but certainly he's no Jaden Daniels as we've seen this season. And it's great to see because this is one of those legacy franchises in the NFL where, like my dad grew up in North Carolina, like here in Charlotte before the Panthers came, same years of Jags, like that. Washington, that was the team that everybody grew up as a fan of for the most part, either Washington or Dallas. That's traditionally who people were fans of. So there's plenty of people, especially in that area still, that want this team to be good. Like I have a friend who he set his Redskins jersey on fire back when they were the Redskins. He had an RG3 jersey and he set on fire because he was done with Daniel Snyder years ago. And now he's living out in Denver, Colorado. He's back on board because finally he has something to believe in again. And that's a city that any NFL town, that's all you got to do is give people hope. Because you give them hope, they're gonna inject.
They're gonna do it
right there. That's all they want.
Brother, 1982, 12, 13-year-old me, they excused us from Prince George's County schools, and we braved. It had to be 10, 15 degrees, man, downtown D.C., and we stood there just to wave at some buses for 3 hours. So I know
and they
what
might
it's
be
like.
Bringing back RFK, like
right down in the middle, right off Benning Road, man.
It's
Come
a
on,
winning team. You got RFK right there. You got the Armory as well, right across the street. My cousin used to work over there. You got all that right there, right in the heart of the city. Like Commanders, DC football will be back. Officially, if that actually happens.
That's right. And so shout out to those people that braved the Daniel Snyder era for all of those years. You have made it back. And order is now being restored for you guys. So congratulations. We'll talk a little bit more. We'll talk about the tank or not the tank. We'll talk about bad teams now. To tank or not the tank and how that whole thing works. I don't know how it works, but we'll do it in the third and final segment and a Monday Night Football preview here on Locked On NFL. All right, let's get to it. The Jaguars beat the Titans yesterday, and some Jag fans are mad. Titans fans are super happy. Tyler Rowland is super happy about it. In fact, I'll let you hear about it. But we're going to talk about them, the Raiders, the Giants, and all of these teams that had a chance to get the Shador sweepstakes. And, well, there's some people that had some other things in mind. Listen to Tyler Rowland.
Look, let's all just be honest here. That was a great loss for the Tennessee Titans. That was a perfect way to tank for the Tennessee Titans. The game was more entertaining than the previous matchup between the Titans and the Jaguars. We got a lot of good plays from Calvin Ridley. Tajay Spears looked good before he got banged up. Chikakonkwo, once again, had a good day. There were some good moments. It was an okay football game in the rain, ugly, wet, all of that, but not the worst game that I've seen from the Titans this year. And ultimately, they get the loss to the Jaguars, which is great for their draft pick, obviously. And with the Jags and the Titans being right there battling for draft position, the winner of this game, in my opinion, is the real loser. So just a really good tank for the Titans in this game. And now you play a motivated Texans team who wants to get momentum going into the playoffs. That should be a loss for the Titans as well, securing a top 3 draft pick this April. Huge tank loss for the Titans and a great outcome on Sunday.
All right, I'll give you my opinion on it, but I'm going to let you go ahead and cook, Julian. What do you think about that whole line of thinking?
Well, actually, the Texans are another team that has nothing to play for, and they should absolutely go ahead and let Tennessee win that game on Sunday. I hate that line of thinking. It's sickening that people are far more concerned about losing games in draft position than actually winning football games. Like Raiders fans being pissed off the last 2 weeks, even though they have an outstanding player in Brock Bowers, who's been incredible as a receiving tight end for them this year. They're mad because now they're not in position to take Shador or Cam Ward, and there's no guarantee either one of those guys is going to come into the league and be good. So I hate it. I honestly wish there was a lottery, and this is coming from somebody who's from Charlotte, North Carolina, and has watched the NBA team in my hometown multiple times screwed over by the lottery process. They had the worst record in the history of the NBA, and the league-owned team in New Orleans, where the franchise came from here in Charlotte, they got the draft pick. They got Anthony Davis. I hate the lottery, but I would rather there be a lottery than people out here wanting their teams to lose. And now looking at Drew Lock becoming a villain in New York because the Giants found a way to beat a hapless Colts team that was still contending for the playoffs. Like I cannot stand it. Now New England is in a great position because they already have their quarterback. They can find a sucker. So it's still possible for New York to move up there. Cleveland is sitting in the 3rd spot. They're going to stick with the shot, it looks like. Tennessee, they need to get a quarterback, but they got to do a lot of things. All their free agent signings, for the most part, have been colossal failures. Do they have the right head coach? Rand Carthon as general manager, is that going to work out? Because it seems like to me that Amy, the owner down there in Jacksonville, or in Tennessee rather, she got a lot of things wrong. So cool, you got the draft pick, but talking about a franchise, and you have one as well that's constantly in the top 10, top 5, being bad has gotten them nowhere. So congrats, you got the draft pick. Are you going to get the right guy? Are you going to develop him? Are you going to put everything around him? Or are you going to continue to just be terrible? My guess is you're going to probably continue to be terrible.
We have to start normalizing this. There's a way that you can discuss now. Granted, to Tyler's credit, he was speaking after the game, right?
Sure.
And he was looking back saying, this is almost like, hey, man, on the flip side, so we're not knocking Tyler, but there were people prior to a lot of games this weekend saying you can't win. In a contact sport, that is literally an oxymoron. How do you tell people to go out and get punched in the face and not hit people back? You can't even, the fact, in the NFL, they talk about winning every moment of every day, right? Tom Coughlin came out here and gave a speech about, I'm trying to win lunch today. You teach people to compete, and the crescendo of that is on display 3 hours every Sunday in front of people, right? But it's everything that you do that builds up to that. Now you get to this point where guys are going to be free agents. They need to put out good tape because they need jobs. Right. You get coaches. You ever want to bring a player into an organization? If I'm Shador Sanders or whoever, I don't ever want to go anywhere where they lay down and quit.
Exactly.
No, even for me, I'm sorry. Don't do it. It's just, you can't. It's almost as if we talk about this as if it's not that, man. It's football. That's like telling a boxer. You know how a boxer flops? He flops. I got a buddy of mine, man, that did 10 years in prison. I said, how was it? He said it was terrible, but I became the barber, or I became this guy that everybody came to for sports and trying to figure out point spread. So so that's like that guy saying prison was worth it because I went and got some things that helped my self-esteem. No,
right, yeah.
It's like you make the best of a bad situation.
Like, here's another thing. Like, the only time I'll even listen to it being a good loss is if you're someone like New England, where you have your quarterback. So now what you're doing is you're sitting there and you're waiting for that desperate sucker to go trade up to number 1, like Carolina did not too long ago when they traded with Chicago to get Bryce Young, and then they gave up a ton of assets. You see, most of these times, the teams that gave up a ton to get that quarterback are worse than the team that they traded with. Now, Chicago, they bucked that trend because they're still a mess. And Carolina, I mean, they got blown out. Both those teams are still only 4-win teams. We've seen Denver, Seattle was better off than Denver before. Now, Denver, they've gotten things figured out with Sean Payton in the second year there. You look at Houston compared to Cleveland. Houston, much better situation. Yep. So that's the only time I'll listen. Like, if New England wants to say, all right, Drake, who almost had his second concussion on Saturday, that's probably a good reason not to play him. All right, Drake, we're going to sit you back and we're going to have Jacoby Brissett. Whether it might not matter anyways. I mean, they're playing Buffalo, so Buffalo probably is not going to try to win that game. I would listen to that because that means New England then can trade with some sucker and get a lot of compensation. But when it's all about let's get one player to fix the franchise, I'm not here for it.
I'm also not here for this. And I'm not here for people that go, the offensive lineman for New England basically, or the Giants said something like, it's about culture. You know what I'm saying? What kind of culture is it? I agree with that to a certain extent. Look, man, if you're sitting here talking about getting the number 1 pick at the end of the year, hey, something wrong with your culture too. You ain't changing no culture by winning in week 17 or 18. So I understand, but that's not a good reason. All right, real quick, Monday Night Football. Detroit has something to play for. And even though they're banged up, they still have something to play for, and that's home field. How bad does this get tonight in San Francisco?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were about to play a clip. My bad. I don't know. San Francisco is unfortunate this season. I do think Detroit is a team that will play their players. I don't think that Dan Campbell's going to sit them. And I know I joked about coming up on Saturday, depending on how things play out with the Ravens, where Pittsburgh and Cincinnati could be playing for absolutely nothing in that game. And I mean, I think Cincinnati's are in a bad situation considering KC's not going to play their stars and Denver should be able to win that game. But like Detroit's already gone through a week of preparation. Like, can they change everything? Like, can they just straight up go to their backup and like all their backups in the game tonight when they clearly have prepared all week, I would think, to play their starters?
They're already playing their backups. They're playing their backups to their backups,
Oh, they already came out?
No, what I'm saying is most of their starters are in reserve.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's the case to not do it, but I feel like they've already prepared to play like Jared Goff and everybody who is not obviously injured
and they can still win home field. They can still win home field. So, I mean, you got to go out and try to play it. But the thing with Detroit is, man, I think they know one speed, bro. They know one way to do it, and I think they're going to do it tonight. I look for them to beat San Francisco into oblivion. I'm serious.
Dan Campbell does not strike me as the guy who's concerned about let's rest. Like, it's a totally – because I can get if it's the final game of the season – but we're talking about it's the second to last game. Come on. No. And in the NFL too, like that would be I don't know. The league can't really do anything about it, but that would be a bad situation. Or you got ESPN paying all this money for this Monday night game. And in Detroit's like, now we're going to opt out of this game.
Yeah. And like I said, if they be doing it, they'd be giving up the chance to have home field. They actually play Minnesota.
Well, then they get it regardless. I mean, if they beat Detroit on Sunday, it doesn't matter. So, whether they win or lose.
Oh, you mean Minnesota?
Minnesota, right? Like Detroit,
Philly
Minnesota.
Can Philly do it? Philly can't win out, though, and get them.
No, it's only because Philly lost. I wouldn't say lost to Washington last weekend.
That's right.
It's either Detroit or Minnesota. So it does not matter tonight. But I just feel like you've already gone through a week of preparation. And then yesterday at 8, you found out that you don't need necessarily play your starters in this game. I think it's a little bit too late to kind of change everything up there.
Yeah, and then guess what? This is the site where they lost that game they should have won last year to go to the
Right.
Super
They
Bowl.
want to win this game.
So now I know it's like, nah, we ain't letting y'all jokers off the hook. We're gonna bash you. And I did all that to tell you this. I'm 10 points behind in my fantasy championship, and I got Detroit's defense. So that's why I'm sitting there saying, Julian, please tell me they ain't gonna tank. They ain't gonna. But I just remembered if they did decide to pull their starters, they'd have to play the people from the assembly line at the Ford plant in Detroit because they ain't got nobody else. They're already playing backups to the backups.
Yeah, people from the old Packard, old Packard studio, or not studio,
I know it, right?
Factory.
All right, have a good time with it. We'll watch the game and be here tomorrow. Tyler Rowland will also be here because we get a double dose of Locked On NFL each and every day. For Julian Council, Tony Wiggins, you guys take care. Thank you for joining us. Take care of each other. Enjoy football tonight.